You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more of your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and sometimes we have to make decisions. Dang you, life shakes fist at sky. Sometimes those decisions are easy and you can make them relatively quickly, but a lot of times we have real tough decisions and we'll spend a lot of time ruminating about it, wondering if we're doing the right thing, and sometimes we might even experience regret. When it comes to ending friendships, we may err on the side of taking a lot more time or even too much time when deciding whether or not we should end a friendship. In today's episode, this is the second episode of a multi-episode series on friendship breakups. We'll explore when it might be time to call it. Last time I shared with you what the relationship breakup process looks like, including friends coming together. Isn't that joyful? Maintaining it, a little bit more work, but still good. And then coming apart, and that might be the part that gets really tricky. So it's now time to see if we decide to be more actively or more passively about moving through those coming apart stages. And here's a review of those stages. If it's been a little bit since you listened to that episode, that first stage being differentiating, and that's where you really sort of highlight the differences that you're no longer similar. Circumscribing, and that is where communication decreases or the difficulties or the differences become bigger. Stagnating, you're stuck with like really shallow self-disclosure. There's really no safe topics to talk about. Avoiding is when you're no longer around each other or you're avoiding conflict or those difficult topics. And then finally terminating, where you formally end the relationship and you might even have, quote unquote, the talk. Now, the next episode will cover how to do a friendship breakup if you decide to do so, and to determine the best way to do it. Yes, that's right. There will be more decisions coming our way. But first, let's talk about if it's time to end a friendship. I think it's important to note that friendships are different from other relationships in a lot of different ways, but one of them is that friendships are voluntary. We get to choose who we get to be friends with. Okay, most of the time, right? Because if we flash back to when we were kids, it's sort of like, hey, I'm friends with my neighbor kid, the person who lives across the street, or I'm friends with my siblings. But as you get older, you get to be like, hey, you seem like a weirdo, and I'm a weirdo. Let's be weirdos together. And you get to decide to be friends. So it seems like because we get to choose, that ending them would be easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? But that's not the case. Friends mean a lot to us. So if you spend a lot of time worrying and thinking and justifying and rethinking and regretting when it comes to a friendship, that's completely normal. On the other hand, I think sometimes we feel like we're obligated to stay friends with folks, and that is simply not the case. Just because you were friends with that neighbor kid when you were 4 doesn't mean you need to still be friends with them when you're 14, 24, and so on, right? Sometimes that's just it's not how it happens. So, for example, some friends will be in our lives forever, but that's not all of our friends. We have work friendships that may end when we leave that job, and we have friends in one city, and our friendships change when they move across the country. In fact, according to Nicholas Christakis, the author of Blueprint, The Evolutionary Origins of a Good Society, friendships last about 10 years, and that's the average. Some of these may end sooner, but as we talked about in an earlier episode, taking a break from a friend can help make the relationship last longer, might be more satisfactory. So certainly as you are in the decision-making process, right, you're thinking and ruminating and thinking and doing some more thinking and wondering, that one option is going, hey, maybe I sort of take a break. I step back from the friendship and then come back and see what it's like. Now, if you're past that or you're just not sure that's the option, then let's do what today's focus and goal is, and that is to talk about the reasons to end a friendship. So I read a bunch of different articles, and these are all located in show notes, and then combining that with what I know about friendship research and experience and watching all the television that I do, I guess we can add that in. I put together a list of reasons to call it quits. Again, how we call it quits will be discussed in the next episode, so we're going to put a pin in that, okay? So let's go ahead and dive into the reasons to end a friendship. And the way that I organize the information, it's like, so I read it all, and it's like, all right, let me summarize and synthesize and get it into something that's easier to digest, if you will. And so I have it set up as assessments, right? So if you're already thinking and ruminating, then you can do some quick assessments while you're listening to me, or maybe you listen and then you do the assessment, or maybe you've already done some of these assessments and it helps confirm one way or another for you, right, as you listen to this episode. So the first assessment that I have is, let's do a self-assessment. This is when you ask the question of, how does this relationship make me feel? If the answer is, it doesn't make me feel good, it might be time to explore why it doesn't make you feel good. And if the why is a problem, it may be time to end the friendship. And so some of the things that you could do during a self-assessment is think about, okay, so if this relationship doesn't make me feel good, and the why is because they actually make me feel worse, right? So they might say things that put me down, or they do things that would show that they're not supportive. And a lot of times, one of those, I don't know if you want to call it a red flag in a store that only sells red flags. I heard that on a TV show the other day, right? Or maybe it was a commercial. But a red flag might be that they can never be happy for your accomplishments or the things that you do and you're excited about. So they make you feel worse, or that you aren't able to accomplish things. You don't feel supported, and you don't feel like they join you in celebrating the wins. And friends are supposed to celebrate with each other and to help each other through when things don't go exactly how you hoped it would be. And really, it should be about, like, can we lift each other up, right? And so if you think about it, and you're thinking about the goals you have in life, and if you don't feel like you can achieve those goals with this person by your side, it doesn't mean they're like there as your coach or they have to do the goals for you. It's just the idea that a friend's like, you can do it. Like, they're like your hype person. They might ask you about progress. You can let them know about victories. You can talk to them a little bit about fears. So it's not so much that they need to be like, it's not like they're a coach and you're going to the Olympics. The idea is that our growth as people and our accomplishments should be helped by friendship, not hindered. So again, if it brings you down, you don't feel like you're growing, they are saying things to you that make you feel bad, and they don't support the things that you do, then this is part of that self-assessment, and maybe that becomes a problem for you. And then that, if this is like a check mark on the assessment for this self-assessment, then you might be going, okay, yeah, it's time to end a friendship. Under your self-assessment, there's a couple other things that you should sort of take inventory of. So for example, let me paint a picture. It's a Friday afternoon. You're sitting on the couch. Maybe you have the day off. Maybe you don't work in the summer like me. Well, I do. I'm teaching. But anyway, let's say you're sitting on the couch and you are just relaxing, enjoying whatever it is that you do. Maybe you're listening to a podcast. Maybe you're watching TV, reading a book, taking a little napsies, whatever you're doing. And then your phone dings and you look at it and it's them. If you experience any dread when you see that message, that is something about the relationship that is not making you feel right. So you dread having to talk to them, to respond to text messages, and to hang out with them. And so if at this point you feel like it's an obligation to hang out with your friend, then this self-assessment is telling you that this relationship is not something that you probably want to participate in. And what can end up happening is this. we come up with all sorts of excuses to get out of doing things with them. So it might be like, oh, I forgot I scheduled an appointment, or oh, darn it, once you know I have a headache, or oh, this thing came up. It reminds me of a Brady Bunch episode. As you probably know, that's one of my favorite shows. I just got done doing a rewatch, and Marcia's the eldest daughter, is trying to figure out how to let a guy down gently because she wants to go out with another guy. So, of course, she turns to her big brother, Greg, and he's like, oh, when I want to let girls down gently, I just say, something suddenly came up. So if you're looking to the Bradys for advice here, right, you're like, something suddenly came up. That might be an indicator that you are making excuses, right? So you feel like you have to hang out with them, but you're delaying it in some way, or you don't want to do it at all. And so that could also be an indicator like, this isn't going so well. Then let's say that you actually do hang out with them. And when you get home, you're so drained, like emotionally, physically, mentally drained, because it's so much drama, so much going on. It's so hard to like muster up anything to make the hangout happen. These are all indicators on your self-assessment that you might want to think about a little bit more, or maybe you're like checking them off as I say them, and you're like, you know what, this sounds like it might be time to call it quits. The last thing that I have under the self-assessment, which goes perhaps back to not feeling supported, or when you're hanging out with them, it's all about their drama, is that they don't take your concerns seriously, whether it be a concern about something that's going on in life in general, or that they are not concerned with the concerns that you have about the relationship. So they dismiss you, right? They dismiss the concerns you have, whether it's small or large. And that would be an indicator that this relationship probably doesn't make you feel very good. So after you do a self-assessment, and sure, there might be other things that fit there, but those are pretty common. And across all the articles I looked at were the ones that really stood out, and I labeled them as a self-assessment. And so if you have any ideas for self-assessment, I love to hear from all of you, your experiences, things that you might be reflecting on, because the idea here is when we can celebrate friendship, let's do it. But if we're working through issues, let's help each other out, right? That's my thinking. And just in case you forgot, the new email address is friendswithalysa@gmail.com. So if you got any ideas of what else can be included in the self-assessment, then feel free to email me. All right. So now that we've done a self-assessment, it's time to do a friendship or a friend assessment, if you will. So you're thinking about how you feel, right? And then it's sort of like turning and going, so what's going on with them, right? So one of the first things is that stood out from all the articles that I read is that a lot of times it might be time to end a friendship when people feel like the friend is being really selfish. So that could be the relationship is one-sided. So remember when I said they only talk about them and all their drama, right? And so it's one-sided. It's not just in the conversation that you are having with them, but they also might take advantage of you in some way. And that could be financially or in some other ways, right? There's lots of ways, unfortunately, that people can take advantage of us, right? And so what you might find is that the only time they reach out is when they might need something from you. So you might be trying to like connect with them, like, let's hang. And it's like, oh, I can't. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need you for this. Can you come over and help me do this thing? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you give me a ride? Can I borrow money? Can I do these sorts of things? And needing something from you. And it can be tangible like money or intangible like your time, attention, skill, or anything else. Not only that is something to consider is that just the joy of having friends, having them as a friend is gone. And friendship should be about joy, right? I love to celebrate friends, and I know that we're going to have some difficulties. That is inevitable. That is life. That is people. That is relationships. But one of the main qualities of friendship and why we choose certain people is because we enjoy them. We love spending time with them. We have fun. We laugh. Right? We're laughing. Right? It's like you want to be around them. But then when it starts to turn negative and it's just all negative, there's no joy, the conversation maybe starts to feel forced. It starts to be all about them, or you just don't have anything to talk about. Like you might not have anything in common anymore. Like, so think about that stage in relationship process, right? Of differentiating. Like you start to see like maybe we don't have as much in common as we did before. Maybe you have changed in a certain way or they've changed in a certain way. And those changes might mean like a drift apart. So it makes it more difficult to be friends with someone else. And so if you're doing your friendship assessment, it's like, what do you have in common with them anymore? Do they ask you questions about your things? Because even like my friends do things that I don't do, but I can still ask them about it, right? And they ask me about the things that I do that they don't do, right? We don't have to like and do everything together. But if there's no conversation or the conversation is negative or it's only about them, then that starts to be something that could be problematic under our friendship assessment. Okay? Then we start to think about, okay, so if it is one-sided and they only contact me when they need or want something, then we don't feel like they value us or our time, that our time is not important, that we're not important. And so there's a lot that can come from that, but certainly it's like, well, what's the point then? Like, I'm not here to be your assistant. They don't need to be your coach, and you don't need to be their assistant, right? Okay. And so we certainly want to be sure we're around people that value us, and that a friendship is about both people being involved. And that's why I have a lot of these under the friendship assessment, because it's a duo, a pair, group, whatever size friendship you're talking about. And what happens when these sort of things occur is that we don't feel like we can count on them because they're only contacting us when they need something. But when we need something, it's like, oops, sorry, I'm busy, or I can't, or sorry about that. And so you can't count on them to be there for you when you need them. And then, or it could be the opposite of that. They're, demanding so much time that it almost becomes dysfunctional and that it's codependent, right? Or that they can't do anything without you helping them. This is maybe demanding not only that you might be their assistant, but you are their coach. Like they're saying, I can't do these things. I can't function in my life without you. And that is not our job, right? We each individually, right? Yeah, I'm about to say this. We each individually are responsible for ourselves and ourselves alone. We can't control other people. We can only control our responses to them and the decisions that we make about the relationship. And if they're expecting you to do everything for them in a sense that they're too dependent on you, then that is not your responsibility. That is their own, right? And that's really tough. Like, that's a tough sell, right? Like, I mean, I think about that just with myself alone. And it's like, gosh, I am one individual who lives by themselves. So my biggest conflict is probably with Ferguson, my little orange cat. Well, little, he's athletic. My athletic orange cat who demands his food every day and is unhappy with me because the food isn't there when he wants it to be, and it doesn't refill the second that he's had a nibble, right? That's my biggest conflict. So then thinking about that, someone wouldn't be able to do anything without me. I already got Ferguson. I got Rooney. I got Finn. I got myself. My dance card is full in that. Can I help? Can I listen? Can I provide advice? Can I take you to our local ice cream place to get ice cream nachos? Yes, that's a thing. Delicious. Yes, I can do all those things. Can I do everything for you on top of doing everything for me? No, because as a typical normal human being, I can barely take care of myself, right? So when you have someone who's overly dependent on you, that is problematic. And then you might start to see some other things that might be red flags, also like being possessive of your time and that you can't have other friends, or being jealous that you spend time with romantic partners, friends, or just spending your time doing other things, or that they try to control you in some way, what you think, what you do, what you eat. I've had, people who used to be my friends indicating to me what they think I should wear, what I should try to look like. And I'm like, no, this is what you get if you I mean, if you're trying to help me out, I'm like dressing for prom or a wedding or something, and I'm like, which dress? And you give me advice, that's fine. But if you're like, I don't think you should wear that. Like, this is how I come. And it mainly comes with Old Navy leggings that I got for $5. So get on board, or I guess it's time to call it quits, right? And maybe I'm being a little tough, but certainly I'm talking more generally. So I'm like, confident, like, let's do this. But if it was like someone that I've been friends with for years, I'd probably be like, should I? I would be going through a lot of the same feelings that you might be going through if you're trying to decide whether or not to end a friendship. Or if you're not currently going through that, you've been through it before. And in the times that I've done it, it's tough to manage. But we have to think about ourselves, right? Self-assessment, we're not feeling good. Friendship assessment, what are they bringing to the duo? Are they, showing up like you're showing up? Or are they demanding everything for themselves, right? That's the friendship assessment. Now, we have to go to our third assessment. This is our third and final assessment in determining whether or not we should call it quits with a friend. And that is what I call the deal breaker assessment. So this might be a little bit of self, this might be a little bit of friend assessment, but these might be the decisions that might be the easiest to make, right? Because these are your personal deal breakers. And we each have our own deal breakers that, some of us are maybe a little bit more clear about it. Like, if someone did this, this is the end, whether it be a romantic relationship or a friendship. Some people might realize their deal breakers once something happens in a relationship, but this might be it's kind of like a living, breathing document. We might delete some things. We might add some things. I know since the pandemic, I've added a few for myself, but these are some of the things that are going to be part of your decision on whether or not you think it's time to actively or passively end the friendship. And although some of these, or in some cases, might be a quick decision, I can tell you that in both cases where I've specifically ended a friendship, and there might be more, but there's two that really sort of had an impact on my life, if you will, that I still was thinking, well, they didn't mean to do that, right? Like, you're trying to give the benefit of the doubt. You're thinking maybe, I wasn't, paying attention. I had rose-colored glasses on. I had beer goggles, whatever. You weren't in your full Alysa zone to understand what was going on. Like, I've done all that where I'm trying to justify someone's bad behavior that impacts me in a negative and meaningful way. And so even though some of these might be easy, also think that because we're friends with these people, that we do want to, how do I say it? It's like when I talk about lying and deception and say, like, some people have a lie bias and some people have a truth bias, right? So when police are interrogating a suspect, it's a lie bias. They're just waiting for them to confess. But most of us, even though you're probably like, everyone lies to me, we generally want to believe, at the very least, if we don't believe wholeheartedly, that the most important people in our life are telling us the truth, right? So that's sort of the idea, if we can use it as a metaphor, is that we are assuming that our friends are good and that they're good to us and that they would never hurt us. Those of you who are listening that have been in my dark side class know that we always hurt the ones we love. So friends are definitely going to hurt us, and they might do something that's a deal breaker, or they might create a new deal breaker for us. So here they are. The first one is general in the sense of it matters to you individually what this is, but this friend has betrayed your trust. Now, there could be lots of ways in which this has happened. A common one might be, maybe perhaps flirting with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or maybe getting in on a relationship that you're having. So then not only is that a deal breaker for you, perhaps in the friendship, but also in the romantic relationship. But there can be lots of ways people violate and betray your trust, right? And so again, think about what would be a betrayal to you, right? Now, me, I say the word betrayal a lot. So my brother and nephew were visiting, and so they came to my parents, and I went down and I stayed the weekend. And we have this amazing place that anyone from the mid-Michigan area is gonna be like, what? And that is Quality Dairy. It's like, I call it fancy 7-Eleven, and Quality Dairy makes a lot of their own products like donuts, ice cream, all of the good stuff in life, right? And their glazed donuts are chef's kiss. So I was like, we should get glazed donuts on Sunday. So I go home Sunday, we didn't get glazed donuts. The next day on Monday, I get a text message, we went to Quality Dairy and got donuts. And my reply back was betrayal, right? So maybe I'm being over dramatic when I use the word betrayal, but it's up to you to determine what you would consider to be a betrayal. Do many of us believe that there are some common betrayals? Absolutely. Maybe they lied to you about something. Maybe, again, they infiltrated on a romantic relationship of yours, right? But then that also brings in one of the biggest betrayals that might happen in a friendship is they don't keep your secrets. So they violate your confidence, right? And so that is often a betrayal. And I can think of, it just could be personal information about yourself. It could be health related. It could be relationship related. It could be something that you've done that you're not proud of. It could be something that's embarrassing or humiliating that you've shared with them as a way to vent, or hopefully they help you through it, maybe make you feel better. There's just so many secrets and the secret sounds like, ooh, I got a secret. But the thing about it is, our information is ours. It just becomes a little dangerous when we share it with other people, because then they can share it with other people. So we have to trust that our friends will keep our information confidential. But sometimes, friends slip up. Sometimes they do it intentionally, right? That, again, going back to, we always hurt the ones we love. So oftentimes, the person that we expect the most to keep our secrets is a friend. So that would certainly be a deal breaker for a lot of folks. And I think that there's even far more serious ones, and I'm sure that you can think of plenty of examples. But one that I would think of is if there's friends and one of them is gay and they haven't come out of the closet yet, and they tell people, that's a huge personal violation, right? It's that's not cool in any right. It's always up to that person to determine if they're ready to come out and share that information with people. So then moving on to the next assessment we need to do in a deal breaker is that we each have our own individual boundaries, things that we believe that on one side is the line and it's fine, and on the other side of the line, it is not. And so it might not be necessarily something that they've done specifically to you, but there's a boundary that you have. And so maybe it is directed at you, or it could just be something like, and this isn't I'm not trying to word it as if this is, it's not a big deal. But if you wearing a mask still, because pandemic's still going on, and they don't want to, and you say, but if you're going to come over to my place and do this, then we're going to wear a mask. But if we're out in public, it's up to you to do whatever you want. But then if they don't do that, it's one of those things, you have communicated expectations to someone and saying, this is a boundary for me. This is what I need to keep my peace or to feel safe or whatever the case is. And then if you've been communicated those expectations and then you specifically violate it, then you are sort of stomping on someone's boundary. And for each of us individually, this is where we need to be selfish, right? In the sense of we have to protect ourselves. And if our friends are going to help protect us by maintaining our boundaries, then it might be the time to find friends that will. Some of the other things that become deal breakers are certainly if they actively try to jeopardize your well-being. So they put you or create situations that are unsafe in whatever way that might be. So if you're no longer drinking, but they take you someplace where there's alcohol, or they keep trying to get you to drink alcohol, or trying to get you to do certain things that you don't want to do. And it can jeopardize your physical, mental, emotional, social well-being, financial well-being, whatever it might be. And so again, I think the deal breakers, again, kind of go back to a self-assessment, but these are the hard lines, right? And anything that's going to jeopardize our well-being, like the first person to protect ourselves is ourselves, right? Sometimes we protect other people before we protect ourselves, but we gotta take care of our peace. We have to protect it. And then finally, under the deal breaker assessment is when you do realize you might have some differences, or that you discover or something has changed, that you just have different moral compasses. And so I think in a lot of the episodes in which I talked about the pandemic, I think that is something where people have huge differences about things, but people might label those as moral. They might label a lot of different social issues as moral. And as people start to realize as a society, as we sort of navigate the difficulties of a pandemic and the difficulties of racial injustices and all the things that are going on, that we start to see where people stand. And for us, that might not be something that we can stand next to. And so those can be really difficult. Like sometimes we might do we can agree to disagree, but sometimes we can't. Like, can't say I can't stand next to someone who's going to be okay with X happening, right? Or Y is, that they're okay with Y or Z, right? Again, these are examples that would be specific to you, what you would see as morally important in which to be. These are the things that you consider to be jeopardizing your well-being, your secrets, your boundaries, what you consider to be betrayals. These are your deal breakers. And so if this is something you haven't thought about before, you may generate a list of deal breakers so that when you start to interact with people and you notice these sorts of things, you can determine if that is a relationship you want to continue. So as you get to know new people or make new friends, and the thing about it is that rigid? Perhaps, but again, we need to protect our own peace. And sometimes, and maybe it's just, and I know a lot of people who might be listening might be like, you're not that old. I'm old enough to be like, I'm too old for nonsense. So deal breakers might help me navigate new relationships, because I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to have time for that. That moral compass issue. Yeah, no time for that. Nope. We have very different boundaries. Nope. You talked about betraying past friends. Okay, I'm out. Right? So these sorts of things might help us as we're in friendships, right? So there we go. We have 3 assessments. We have ourself. How do we feel about it? The friendship assessment. What are they bringing to the friendship? Is it a balanced relationship? And then, of course, the deal breakers that could end things immediately, sometimes making it a little bit more difficult because I was going to say we like to justify. I think we do, but we don't. We're like, oh, why are we justifying that? Yeah. But these are the things that we can start to think about more deeply. And I think, though, that there are some types of friendships or types of friends where some of these things might not be as problematic for us. And I would like to explore that a little more, where we might make some exceptions or exemptions for particular friendships or friends. And so I'm going to make a brief video, and it'll be available to patrons on Friends with Alysa, so that you can hear a little bit more about that. But what we have now is, okay, now that we're hopefully making decisions, but certainly If you have questions about making decisions, or you want to not only, I made a big deal about self-assessment, if you want to add anything, but also relationship or the friendship assessment, the deal breaker assessment, if you have anything you'd like to share or ask, again, feel free to email me at friendswithalysa@gmail.com. And then what we have coming up next is how we do the breakup if we decide to do it actively. I'll briefly talk about passively because I've done that a little bit before. And then that's the third episode. And then the fourth episode will be grieving friendships. So stay tuned. There's more to come. Like I said, there's more decisions, I guess, whether or not we like it. And please reach out if you have anything you'd like to share. So until next time, friends, do these assessments to see if it's time to call a friendship, because who could you be with other friends? Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com, and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.